Hello everyone, and welcome back to Concilium Watch. My name is Nathan, and today we're going to go over an army builder briefing for Starmada. Starmada is an army characterized by their extensive access to Climbing Plus units. You almost have to try to make a list without Climbing Plus. The theme of Starmada is definitely going to be mobility, and we pair our mobility with some hard-hitting attack pieces. All the while, we've got our security fire teams locking down our deployment zone. Now, before we get started, let's go over the 5 things that you usually need in a sectorial list. You need a core fire team. You need specialists to get objectives done. You need defensive weapons, things like sniper rifles or missile launchers. You need offensive high-burst weapons to get the job done when it's your turn. And of course you need orders, because without orders you can't do much in Infinity. Alright, with that out of the way, I do want to mention that we do have the lists listed in our description down below. And I just want to remind again that we make these lists for fun, but we do encourage you to experiment with your own ideas and build your own lists, because something that works for my playstyle might not work for yours, and that's okay. There's so many interesting things to do in Infinity, it would be a shame to just net list all of your lists all the time. With that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, we're here in Army 7. Let's go ahead and select the O12 faction and go over to Starmada. Now, before we get started with any lists, let's go ahead and check out the new fire team charts. Similar to many other factions, we get access to unlimited duos, 1 Harris, and 1 core. Alright, so let's take a look at some of our options here. We've got a new security fire team, which is a named fire team. It can be a Harris or a core. And this basically features a lot of our really cheap light infantry units all together. We can bring Kappas, we can bring Bluecoats, even the new Raven Eye unit, and very importantly, we can bring Cho. I'm very excited about this because Cho is an amazing lieutenant option, but she also has Chain of Command as an option as well, which is really great for at least one of the lists we're making today. The one thing to note here is that you do have to have at least 1 Kappa or 1 Bluecoat in order to make these fire teams. And notably, all of these units here have the security tag, or classifier, or whatever you want to call them, which means that they all count as pure together for a fire team, for a security fire team. So if you wanted to make a really cheap light infantry Kappa core with a couple of Bluecoats and a Raven Eye all together to help defend, I mean, that's a really solid core that's going to have the maximum fire team bonuses as a defensive or hybrid fire team. Next up, we've got the Nyoka's fire teams. These can be a duo, a Harris, or a core. They must have at least 1 Nyoka in them, but you can also bring in the Epsilon. Very excitingly, again, this is another big addition for Starmada. Bringing that Epsilon in a fire team is a big deal. And you can also bring Hector. Next up, we've got the Beta Trooper fire teams. Once again, duo, Harris, or core. Must have 1 Beta Trooper. And similarly to Nyoka, it seems like these units are very similar. It's just that one of them's light infantry, the other one is robots and heavy infantry. So then we've got the Bronze fire team. These are only a duo, but you must have 1 bronze, and you could bring a Knight of Santiago as well, which is a favorite of mine. I'm a big fan of this sort of, I call it the buddy cop duo of a knight and bronze just running around doing things together. It's a lot of fun. And next up, we've got the Lawkeepers fire teams. Another duo. This is a really interesting option, especially currently in the current ITS season, where you can forego the Impetuous in order to gain cover. So you could put your Lawkeeper in a duo with either another Lawkeeper or this Oko here, which is our sensor bot, and that can be a really solid attack piece with the Red Fury and a sensor in Specialist too. It can almost keep up with the Lawkeeper, but I think the utility of having that sensor to almost auto-discover camo markers, that's a big deal. Next up, we've got the Choxa Long Arms fire teams. This can be a duo or a Harris, and of course you must have at least one Choxa Long Arm in a Choxa Long Arm fire team. These, in my opinion, are a really fun Harris builder unit because they have some really interesting weapons, like EM grenades or pulsars. Those are really high value weapons. And next, we also got access to a Varangian Guard duo. Now, normally I would probably run these guys separate, running around, but, I mean, especially paired with some of our wild cards, it could be a really interesting option. Speaking of wild cards, we've got the Psycop here, maximum of 2 of them. We've got a Bronze with the Nyoka classification, so you can have 2 Bronze in a Nyoka fire team, and they would still count as pure. Pretty interesting. We also get Shona Carano, who's an amazing close combat piece. Parvati, which is an amazing character that's able to heal and repair all of your wound and structure units. And finally, we've got the Tiango fire team option as a wild card. So you can hide a jammer or a killer hacker in one of your fire teams with really solid whip. They've got, I think, whip 14, which is pretty nice. All right, well, now that we've checked that out, let's get started with our first list. For this first list, I think I want to make a list with Hector in it. Hector, especially before the fire team update, was one of my favorite units to run in Starmada because he brings those extra orders, and Starmada can really benefit from having more power on the active turn. So, let's go ahead and check out Hector. I almost always go for the plasma rifle profile. It's a really unique weapon that we don't get access to much in Infinity, at least if you're human. And he comes with a tin bot, he's got the nanopulse for the grenades, he's amazing in close combat, and the plasma rifle combined with the X-Visor means that he's got a lot more range with that weapon, where it would normally be considered more of a short-range weapon. But let's go ahead and take that. And of course, if we want to bring Hector, it's usually good to put him in a fire team, right? So why don't we put him in a Beta Trooper fire team? Now, we could go cheaper with the Nyoka, but I'm sort of thinking I want to build him out with some more durable guys with him. Deciding on which one of these we want, I mean, you don't really need the firewall because he has his own firewall. You could go for a Spitfire, but I've got a different idea for our main weapon that we might use here. So let's go ahead and go for this Doctor. This is a unit that I don't usually bring in a Beta Trooper fire team because obviously the Beta Troopers are structure, so they don't really need doctors around. But for this unit, I think because Hector's a very high value piece and he's got multiple wounds, maybe being able to heal him up will be really useful. And we could grab another Beta Trooper here, but I'm thinking we want to turn this into a Harris, and I think that the Epsilon HMG is really awesome in a Harris. Really awesome outside of a Harris too, to be honest. But the cool thing here is we've got long range, mid-range, and close range. And of course the Doctor can keep the Epsilon and Hector running if they happen to go down. Alright, so now that we've got our Harris, we should probably take a look at our core. If we're running a really aggressive Harris, I'd like to do either a defensive core or a hybrid core. And we've got access to that pretty awesome new security fire team. So I think we're going to make it out of Kappas, because Kappas are going to be the ones that have your long-range weapons out of all of the security fire team options. First, we should, if we're making a defensive fire team, we should either take the multi-sniper rifle or the missile launcher. I'm not too sold on one or the other currently. Obviously, the multi-sniper rifle is really awesome because you can outrange your opponents. You also have some ammo types that are pretty useful. The other thing that the multi-sniper rifle can do is, if you need to, you can use it on the active turn pretty effectively. But, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking for these cheaper security fire teams, BS-12 is pretty great, but it's not the best, right? I'm wondering if the missile launcher is more valuable in some situations, just because if you happen to get a hit, then your opponent's probably dead. So you only have to win once, right? But I don't know. I'm not sold on it. Let's go ahead and do the multi-sniper rifle, and if we need the points, we can always downgrade, or side grade, I guess. Okay. So the second thing I always do whenever I make a core fire team is, after I've got my ARO, I stick a paramedic in there if I can. So paramedic's always going to be useful to, if the sniper rifle happens to go down, you definitely want a way to pick them back up. Because if your opponent has already wasted a bunch of resources taking out your sniper rifle and you happen to get them up in a single order on your next turn, that's a big blow to them. And ARO pieces are always supposed to waste your opponent's orders. So, I mean, you get more value by being able to revive them, is what I'll say. So, we could go for more kappas, but I think we've got some more flavor we can put in here. We've got the new Raven Eye. Raven Eye is pretty cool. You're basically trading, they cost the same as a basic kappa, so you're trading a point of BS and a short range weapon for the fact that they've got mine layer, they're forward observers, they've got a template weapon. So I think I'll make that trade sometimes at least. Many times, maybe. How about we go for this one? There is a Cybermines option, but I'm not totally convinced of that's worth. You know, I mean, I think I'm going to go with the EM mines, because the EM mines are going to be more useful more often. There's not too many times when your opponent has a hacker in your deployment zone, right? So, or I guess a hackable unit. But anyway, so we've got 1, 2, 3 members. Since we have Hector, I'm going to go ahead and pull in, where is she? Cho. Here we go. So Cho is, like I said earlier, really amazing, whip 14. So you could bring her as a lieutenant, but again, we've got a pretty great lieutenant already. But if we're going to be using these guys aggressively, we want to have something sort of like a fallback plan if Hector happens to go down. So we can grab Cho. And Cho is a hollow mask unit. So you sort of have to decide, what am I going to hide her as? I think there's a couple of good options. You could hide her as another Raven Eye. That way they have to guess which one is actually Cho. Oh no, you can't actually do that. Because one Raven Eye has mine layer, the Cho will not. So they'll know which one has fewer mines. You could always just hide her as another Kappa paramedic. Or you could even try to do some mind games and hide her as a Kappa hacker. So they might think twice about walking up with something that is hackable, maybe. Could be interesting. You could also just threaten with more weapons. You could pretend to be a big weapon that they're scared of. You could even hide as a blue coat, maybe. Maybe one of the ones that's got a lot of glue. So they're worried about engaging that. But anyway. So we've got some pretty good firepower here. But we could have more. I mean, I'm a Pano player at heart, so more guns, more fun is my opinion. Let's go ahead and grab an HMG. Again, these are BS-12 units, so that's, I mean, as good as you could hope for on a cheap light infantry corps. And since these are all security fire team members, they'll be BS 15. So, I mean, I'll take that. So we've got 8 orders here. Technically, we've got 10 because of Hector. And we've got some more options here. Now, one thing you might run into with Starmada is you don't have too many MSV options. We do have the Epsilon, which is amazing, and we do get 2 of them, which is very nice. But, I don't know. Sometimes you need alternative solutions. That's why the security fire team is really cool to be able to get that +3 discover, especially if you combine it with like a blue coat that natively gets +3 discover, then you're discovering on a +6. I would love to do that against a impersonator. That'd be really amazing. But another option that we have to combat camouflage is the Oko. So the Oko has a sensor. It's also a specialist that moves pretty fast. And one of the unique things that we get in Starmada is you can combine an Oko with a Lawkeeper. So we can grab the Lawkeeper Red Fury and duo that with the Oko. So now you've got a mobile attack piece and something that can push buttons and also discover camouflage pretty well. I'm really excited to try this combo out. It's kind of like having a souped up version of the sidebot. Obviously they can't attack together like the sidebot can, but just the ability to cart around that sensor on something that can reliably get it there, I'm excited about that. Alright, so we're getting to that point of list building where you kind of have to wind things down and start to think about orders. Or, alternatively, think about things that can help make your orders matter. And there's nothing better than that for that job than the Varangian Guard. They come with their own impetuous order, so you get an extra order to move up. They also have smoke, so you can use the smoke to cover your advance and make sure that you're spending more orders killing and less orders trying to maneuver in a way because you're trying to avoid a missile launcher across the table. Now, for me, whenever I go for the Varangian Guard, I've been trying to get in the habit of taking these 13-point chain cult profiles. Yes, it's a shorter range template, but you get 2 of them, right? So that's more threat, more better, at least sometimes. So I'm going to grab 2 of these, because we get 2. Now, we are running into a little bit of an issue here, because we only have 6 points left. So we could grab a Warcore for 3 points. It's irregular, but it's a solid defense piece. And really, we're only expecting these orders to be used for smoke until something dies and we want to move them in. But if we actually downgrade one of these guys to the chain rifle, now we've got enough for the Kutta. So there. Now we've got 3 orders. We've got a Flash Pulse that has Mimetism now. And yeah, I tend to build my lists in Infinity, or factions that I play. I really like having the maximum amount of orders in one pool, and then use Group 2 as sort of support or just extra little things, you know. So this is exactly what I look for when I build a list. And I think I'm going to call this one Hector Blitz. Because the whole point of this list is, even if we go first and our opponent takes away 2 of our orders, we're still going to have 10 orders to run at them and just cause as much havoc as we possibly can. and then set up for the reactive turn. All right, let's check out the next one. For this next list, I want to play around with the idea that we get access to that cheap security fireteam Harris. So if we're taking a cheap Harris, I'm thinking I want to take a sort of expensive core. So a lot of times before this fireteam update, you would focus on having a cheap core and then an expensive Harris that would run up and do cool things. I think that you can swap it a bit now and still have some success. So for our expensive core, let's go ahead and make a full fire team of Nyoka, like a full pure Nyoka fire team. So there are some profiles here that we can't put in the fire team. You'll notice the ones with parachutist cannot be part of the fire team. That's no big deal. Nyoka are kind of like premium versions of Kappas because they've got the same BS. They do have better CC, but they have climbing plus, and climbing plus is a big deal. They also have +1 damage on their attacks, which is also a really big deal. My favorite profile to use with these is this heavy rocket launcher, because you're really making the most of having that +1 damage and having that template on both of these weapons have templates. You're getting the most bang for the cheapest price, which is 19 points and 1 SWC. Sometimes I'll bring a heavy rocket launcher and a HMG, but I think this time I'm just going to load up on 2 HRLs. The HRLs are solid in the active and reactive turn. You just got to pay attention because if you put them on ARO, their range bands are a little bit shorter than something like a sniper rifle or a missile launcher. So just be mindful when you put one of these on ARO. Now, we don't have access to a paramedic here. Remember, that's my second pick all the time after I've picked my main weapon. But we do have a forward observer, so it's always nice to have a specialist in our fire team. And the multi-rifle is a solid weapon. Now we could grab some other weapons here, or we could play around with the fact that bronze count as pure. Now bronzes are really cool. They have 360 visors, which means that they can never be snuck up on. Like, they can always see behind them, rather. They've got decent martial arts. CC 19 isn't amazing, but if you combine it with their CC weapon of -6, this becomes a -9 in close combat, which is pretty scary. They do have courage, and their biggest claim to fame is the total immunity. So that means they just shrug off glue or adhesive. They don't care about explosive. They could take a missile hit to the chin. Notably, they are hackable, and total immunity will not save them from being hacked. But BTS 6 is pretty solid. They also climb, which is very important when they're hanging out with Nyoka, because that means all of them can climb up and down buildings all day. Alright, so if we've got a couple of long range, I want something that can hit pretty hard in the mid-range. So I like this Red Fury, +1 damage. A little pricey, but we're paying for chonk here. We've got 2 wounds, we've got total immunity. This is the kind of guy where if you're a little bit worried about the matchup, you send the bronze out there to tank a few hits if you fail the face-to-face. And again, I really like having a paramedic with my core. So I'm actually going to pass up on like the specialist operative, and I'm going to try out this bronze paramedic with heavy shotgun. You'll notice that all of these other weapons, I mean, the multi-rifle is solid up close, but we don't have any like solid close range win the face-to-face weapon, and the heavy shotgun can definitely do that. So now that we've got our core, let's go ahead and grab that cheap Harris. You'll notice that we don't have a lieutenant here. Normally I like to put my lieutenants in the core, but we don't really have the option unless we wanted to break up our purity of this fire team and include Hector. So I think we're going to go with Cho as our lieutenant. Cho is kind of useful because, like I said, she's good willpower, and she can also hide among other units. So we'll take her as our lieutenant, and if we do want to make a security fire team core, or Harris rather, we do have to have at least one blue coat or one Kappa. I think I'm going to grab the Kappa paramedic just because, I don't know, I'm a sucker for paramedics. I like being able to bring my guys back to life. And we don't have any heavy weapons here. We could grab something like a HMG on the Kappa. But if I'm going to be using the Nyoka core as my main attack, I kind of want my Harris to be more of a support role. So I like having the paramedic. That means that if we need to revive one of these guys, we can shoot 2 shots in a Harris from afar. And I think I'm going to grab the Psychop. The Psychop multi-marksman rifle with MSV1. It's a really, really awesome attack piece. Higher BS than the Kappas. And it's definitely one of my favorites. You've got a +1 burst nanopulsar, so that's 3 nanopulsars in the Harris. So we're going to kind of use this Harris here. We're not going to move out much because obviously our lieutenant's in it. But what we can do is we can try to discover some camo markers with the Psychop. We don't get the pure bonus, but we do have MSV1. We can try to take out some units that have gotten too close to our deployment zone. This is a great type of unit to hit back against those kinds of units. And if we grab some Varangian, let's go ahead and do that. Once again, let's grab the 2 chain cult options. One of the cool things we can do with this Psychop is if we throw some smoke and then move up into the smoke, obviously the Psychop can see through the smoke because of MSV1. We can go ahead and just light someone up with 3 nanopulsars through smoke. I think that could be a really devastating option. So we have smoke that can help us maneuver a bit. We're running out of points, like usual. But I almost never leave home without at least 1 Epsilon. I mean, it's hard to beat this kind of unit. They're so good. They have climbing plus now too, so I mean, I just really love the HMG. Pairing it with this smoke, it's just really amazing. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to put him in the main group and drag one of these Varangians down. The reason I'm doing that is because if at one point late game, let's say one of our Nyoka rocket launchers are down and we want to form a full core again, it will be impure, but the Epsilon is allowed to join the Nyoka fire team. So it could be a really cool late game trick. And with only 15 points left, I mean, we are going to have not too many options. Really, we just got to go back to the old classics of the AVA-1 Flash Pulse bot. And we've got just enough points for a Fuzzbot. Alright, so I think for this list, I want to call it... Well, we've got a whole fire team that can climb. So I think I'm going to call it something like... You can run, but you can't hide. On a rooftop. Sure. Alright, well, next up, let's go ahead and make a list for something like quadrant control or supremacy. I think one of the hidden strengths of Starmada is the fact that we get so many durable, like scary units that can start in the midfield. And obviously, if you're playing around with a lot of fire teams, it can be tough to afford those big, scary pieces that are in the midfield. But they are really, really good. So, I think that a list like this is going to be ideal for a quadrant control kind of mission because you want to have more points in zones. So, let's check it out. We've got Casanova. He's a favorite of mine. He's even better now because he's got Mine Layer. And he's a specialist. He's really awesome in close combat with a monofilament CCW. Just watch out. You don't want to face total immunity with this guy. His monofilament CCW becomes very blunted very fast against those kinds of units. So he is a mine layer, and he has two options here. We've got EM mines or shock mines. It can sometimes be hard to choose here because you have to decide, do I want to stop someone's advance or do I want to kill a weaker target? I think that both have merit, but for this kind of mission where the whole game could be decided by someone dying right as they get into a zone, I'm going to go for the shock mines. Because if I set him up with some mines and they try to get into my zone but they fail their armor save against the mine, that could be really big. Okay. If we're making a list that the whole point is to forward deploy, you cannot discount Andromeda. She got a bit of a nerf because she only has infiltration +3 rather than +6. But I mean, she's still infiltrating on a 12. That's pretty good. In terms of which profile I recommend, I almost always try to build my lists with this infiltration profile first, just so I have the option if I want it. I don't really take the boarding shotgun as much, just because she already has a template in the form of the zapper, and technically the zapper is more valuable to me because it can intuitive attack. And I just think that if you're in a bad position where you're not going to be able to use her guard, which is her claim to fame here, you're probably going to want more dice to win the face-to-face in your 0 range. So I go for submachine gun. And let's not forget she can also suppress. So mimetism and suppression in cover, that's -9 to hit. That's pretty scary. Okay, well, we do have some other high wound units. We've got the Crushers. Crushers are, again, 1 wound, but they do have no wounding cap and shock immune. Big deal here. They're really awesome shooters. They've got BS-13. They're decent in armor. They're all forward observers. So they're all specialists. In terms of profiles here, we have 3 that have forward deployment +8, and 1 that's a combat jump or parachutist. A lot of people really like this one. I think my personal favorite, well, I don't think I know. My personal favorite is this 35 point with 1 SWC, submachine gun, and light rocket launcher combo. I have won so many games just with one of these units. And I think in this list, I'm going to grab 2. I think that just having that light rocket launcher to be a longer range threat if you need it is just so useful. So we've got 4 units that start in one of those zones, so we're starting pretty good. Before we get too carried away though, let's go ahead and make our core fire team. If we're playing a lot with these kinds of units, these are going to be our main attack units. So again, I'm going to go for more of a defensive core fire team. Let's go ahead and grab the Kappa. Let's go missile launcher this time. And again, let's go ahead and grab that paramedic. And we do have SWC to spare. We could go for something like, we could waste our SWC on a lieutenant. But I don't know. If we're playing very defensive here, I think it might be worth taking the 12-point Kappas and swapping them for the Raven Eye. We're paying a bit for the BS, but they'll be specialists. It's sort of, in this case, I think there's definitely arguments for both, because you get the slightly longer range with a combi rifle if you go with the Kappas. But let's go ahead and grab a Raven Eye Lieutenant, and if we want to hide the Lieutenant, we can grab this as well. So now we've got 4 fireteam members, and we've got 2 EM mines guarding their flank, which is pretty nice. I've sort of been neglecting the glue coats, blue coats, not glue coats. We are going to grab a glue coat. Yeah, so the glue coat here is what I like to call this one. He's an adhesive launcher, +1 burst, heavy riot stopper. So the only lethal weapon he has is his pistol and shock CCW. But for 13 points, I mean, that's a lot of stopping power. I've been kind of neglecting them, but they are really amazing. Like I mentioned earlier, if you combine it with the +3 discover bonus of a pure fire team, they're discovering at +6. They're natural born warriors. They've got 6th sense. They're just really good at wrangling good CC units, which is awesome. I've had a couple of blue coats actually pin down and arrest Shinobu once. It was a really awesome moment. In this list, I think I'm happy with relying on these other units to get the active turn killing done. But again, I'm not going to leave home without that Epsilon HMG. So now we've got even more options for killing. Okay. Well, at this point, let's go ahead and grab our Varangian, as is tradition. And we've got 264 points right now. One of the things that's kind of interesting about these sort of zone control missions is if you invest in something like a drop troop or an AD or parachutist, you can really swing the game in your favor if you happen to land them in a zone that your opponent thought they were going to capture, but they didn't realize that you had, like 30 or something points off the table, and that can really swing the zone into your favor. I think, let's go ahead and grab that Crusher combat jump, 36 points. The reason I like this Crusher here instead of something like the, let's see, because the other option we have is like the Nyoka Fort Observer. We do have the SWC for that, so it could be an option. I mean, that's a solid choice if you want to swap. Then you could grab some more orders. But I kind of like the ability of having 36 points off the table to place in any zone that I want. And if there's no good parachutist locations, you still have the combat jump as an option, landing on a 9. If you have to absolutely be safe in where you're landing. So I think I'm going to go with the Crusher for this list. Maybe it's a bit of a meme to bring all 3 Crushers, but I mean, they're just so good. So I think for this list, since we're sort of planning to use it for quadrant control and stuff like that, let's just say all right, for this last list, I promise for all of you that are gripping your keyboards that I haven't been taking the full 15 order generating bodies. I promise that I'll hit the 15 unit group for this list. Let's go ahead and try that out. Let's go ahead and start with a defensive or hybrid security core. Once again, I think that the security cores are going to be very popular right now because they get those pure bonuses. They get all of the maximum fire team bonuses. Again, I'm going to sort of go with the sniper rifle for now and grab the paramedic. And this time I'm going to give it a bit more teeth and put in that HMG. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and commit and grab Cho as our lieutenant. Whip 14, yes please. And since they're going to basically know that Cho is our lieutenant, let's go ahead and defend them a bit with a Raven Eye. You can use that EM mine to block a stairway if you want, which is pretty nice. Alright, next up, if we're going for a cheap core, let's try to build out a kind of, let's build a fancy Harris. Well, let's say that. So let's go ahead and grab a Beta Trooper. We're not going to bring Hector this time, so let's go ahead and grab the Beta Trooper with the Firewall and a Spitfire. I'm a big fan of this piece. He's another unit that has won me a lot of games. Super fast, super awesome. They've got Mimetism, Climbing Plus. Dodge +3 is helpful for getting rid of mines, especially since they're 2 structure and remote presence. So if they get knocked unconscious, they basically have to take 4 wounds total to be removed from the table completely. So if we want to be able to get this guy up, we're going to need an engineer. And there is no better engineer in O12 than Parvati. Parvati is incredible. She's engineer +3 with whip 15, so she's engineering on a 17. I mean, you cannot ask for a better engineer. Let's go ahead and grab her. And to make sure that we utilize her engineer and doctoring status, we can always put in the Epsilon. I know, I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, but again, the HMG, you just can't beat it. So now we've got a really super powered Harris here. We can use the HMG to fight our way forward and then use the Beta Trooper to take out targets that maybe don't have mimetism, so the HMG's multispectral visor isn't really necessary. And the Beta Trooper is the one that if you're taking a risky engagement, like maybe versus a missile launcher, the Beta Trooper is going to be the one that you want to do in that situation, because if he takes it on the nose and drops down 3 wounds, he's still going to be on the table for Parvati to pick back up. All right, so we're doing pretty good here. We haven't even hit 200 points yet, and we've got some pretty awesome units here. One thing that we haven't mentioned at all, really, but is actually a really amazing piece in O12, is the Raptor boarding squad. The Raptors are really amazing. So BS14 is really great. They're 6'2" move, really fast. Solid armor, solid BTS, solid willpower. 360 visor is a super big deal. And the reason that they're really cool is they've got NCO and this killer hacker option. I'm a big fan of this. So the Raptor also comes with a Deva bot as a synchronized peripheral, which means that they run around together, and so you could shoot someone with your multi-rifle while the Deva bot flames someone with their flamethrower. Now that could be the same target or even different targets, so they've got a lot of damage potential. Now where it gets crazy is the killer hacking device obviously has access to something like Cybermask. Cybermask is a marker state, and peripherals that are synchronized share those states with their owner. So that means that the Raptor can use his Cybermask to impersonate up, and both he and his bot will be in the marker state. This is really awesome for moving through minefields or just crossing gaps and not having to worry about getting shot immediately, because they do have to discover you before they can shoot. So Really amazing unit, like I said. It's kind of hilarious that they give us 4 in Starmada. One day I will make a 4 Raptor list and run it at some point. But for now, let's just take the 1. They are 42 points after all. So let's grab that Raptor. And at this point, we know the drill. Let's go ahead and grab our Varangian Guard. And we can sort of fill up with some more orders now. So we'll always grab the Kutta first. We could grab the Fuzzbot. We do have 2 Fuzzbots, but let's see if we can fill it out with anything else first. We have 2 slots left. We could go Oko. They have, oh, Climbing Plus. I didn't even think of that in the other thing. Wow, that's really good. Unfortunately, we're 1 point shy of grabbing another Fuzzbot, but we could always just take one of our Varangian and downgrade him that 1 point. And bam. All right. So we've got the full 15 regular orders, and the super cool thing is that we can use Cho's Lieutenant order on this Raptor. So because of that, I'm thinking actually we might want to put the Raptor in this second pool. And I don't know, let's swap one of the Fuzzbots up. So now I've got 10 orders in the main pool and technically 6 orders in that second pool. And as for a name, I kind of like how we've got teeth in all of our main units here. So we've got like really scary pieces here. We've got an HMG in our main core, and then we've got the Raptor who's sort of lurking in the shadows. I'm just going to call this one Multiple Threats, because there are so many things that they cannot ignore. They have to deal with it somehow. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these videos. Stay tuned next week. We'll have another video out on Friday. And let us know in the comments. Do you like the lists that we created? Have you run some of the lists that we've created? We'd love to hear any feedback you have. And thank you for watching.